Welcome back to what is now officially the first astrology report for the month ahead. This month, we're talking about February. Guys, this month is the vibe shift. We have so much to discuss and talk about. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. What we're going to be talking about for this episode is going to be all of the transits of February. I'm going to let you guys know what they mean, how to work with them, and we're just going to talk all about the astrology. This is really the vibe. If I were to give this month a title, it'd just be called the vibe shift easily. We're actually going to start off talking about Neptune ingressing into Aries, which is actually January 26th before we get into February. And of course, we're going to be using, this is what I want to do. We're going to be using StarTek. StarTek comes out on Wednesday. If you don't know this already, you should know by now, but StarTek's coming out on Wednesday. Sign up to get the notifications for when we launch at the link in the description. I'll put the StarTek website down there, but you guys will be getting a little special video for the StarTek launch. But if you're interested in the astrology program I'm using, this is my new app called StarTek, and we're going to be using it today. So let's just go ahead and jump in. So like I said, we're just going to first talk about Neptune going into Aries. This happens on January 26th. And I was thinking about this earlier. You know, last year when Neptune ingressed into Aries, it was around the same time that we had the eclipses in Aries and Pisces. We had the nodes shifting from Aries to Pisces. We had the Venus retrograde in Aries and Pisces. We had the Mercury retrograde in Aries and Pisces. And when you have a lot of like stuff happening at like the same kind of degrees of the zodiac, it can be really hard to parse out what exactly is going on. But because this is the only thing, I mean, again, yeah, we're going to have Saturn and Neptune conjoining one another. So that is kind of a part of it. But with just Neptune going into Aries, I think it's going to be, number one, a lot more subtle, but number two, not as confusing and overwhelming. The big thing that you have to understand about Neptune in Aries is that this is its final ingress into Aries, where it's going to be until I think it's 2039, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the exact dates. But what I want you to think about during this time as we get to the end of January is over the past 15-ish years as Neptune's been in Pisces, as we've been idealizing and romanticizing, you know, the dreamy, the openness, Pisces is so open and forgiving and porous, and Aries is so not that. Aries is much more aggressive. Aries is much more dominant. Aries is much more about that ignition, that spark, that fire. Aries, some people will say that the astrological new year is during Aries season, and so therefore technically the new year should be then. I completely disagree with that notion. I think the new year is pretty much exactly where it should be. That's a discussion for another day. But when you think about what Aries represents, it represents when light starts to grow more, and there starts to be more light than there is dark. When you think about what that does here on Earth, where all of the plants they're no longer dead. We're getting out of the winter and we actually start to see sprouting. We start to see growth. And if Neptune is about visualizing, fantasizing, it's about dreams, you have to really look at wherever, number one, Neptune is going into your chart, whatever house it's going into, but just overall, what is the new life you want to begin? You know, a lot of astrologers will say every single day and every single transit's the biggest one of the year and it's life-changing, you'll never see it again. Most of that is bullshit, but there is something to say about the planet of like vision and Neptune just being even about media and how much our world is about media nowadays. What is the new life that you're trying to create? What is the new reality that you're trying to create? We're going to keep talking about this as Saturn makes its way towards Neptune, because that's really about reality and fantasy merging together for better or for worse. But I think as Neptune goes into Aries, we're no longer confused or overwhelmed about, you know, the inside and what it means and, you know, how significant it is, versus we're going to be much more excited. We're going to be much more about visualizing what we're putting our energy into, what we're actually doing, and not just dreaming about. And so I think this is a really exciting way to start the month off. Yes, this is in January. This is on January 26th, but this whole month is about a vibe shift. You know, just to kind of briefly go over the transits real quick. Full moon in Leo, Uranus station direct. The big transits that we really have going on are Mercury going into Pisces and Mercury going into shadow. The month ahead, this month we have a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and it's honestly the worst Mercury retrograde that we'll have in a long time. And we're going to have Saturn going into Aries. We're going to have the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which is really the big one. But at the end of the month, we start to get, or where is it actually at here? Did we get our first eclipse yet? I think we get an eclipse. Yeah, we get our solar eclipse in Aquarius. As we enter eclipse season, which is about major changes going on, this is our first set of eclipses in Aquarius. This month is really, if you felt 2025 lingering over this month, over January, you're not going to feel that by 2026, by, I should say, February. So let's go ahead. What am I doing here? We're playing with buttons today. So let's go to our next transit. We start the month off in February with the full moon in Leo. Now, number one, what's really interesting about this is that this is not an eclipse. However, this is going to be our last lunation in Aquarius and Leo before we get to eclipse season. I think that this full moon in Leo is going to give us some insight into what the eclipses will be like. I think for a much more geopolitical economic spectrum, this is going to be kind of the month where the digital ID stuff kind of starts seeming a little bit louder. The North Node is about extreme hunger, and it's going to start making its way towards Aquarius, where it's going to be like, you have to be online and all that stuff, which is really interesting because a lot of us are going to start going more offline with Uranus and Gemini. But the thing I want to talk about with this is, while everything's in Aquarius, which is really tribalistic and it's really like kind of open, but it's much more whose side are you on? Aquarius is also very like, how can I see people and community from like a bird's eye view? Like, I feel like Aquarius is very like looking at people as like cogs. And Leo, the opposite of that, is much more individualistic. Another way that I like breaking down the Leo and Aquarius axis is really about like the performer and the crowd, or the king and its people that it rules over. And so full moon in Leo, number one, what I always like about the full moon in Leo is that there's this like moment of extreme confidence and extreme passion in the depths of winter. You know, the sun is about like our vitality and our energy. And when it's in Aquarius, it's in detriment, right? For a lot of people, you know, in the Northern Hemisphere, heaven forbid, I talk about people in the Northern Hemisphere. When people in the Southern Hemisphere, they're like, well, what about us down here? There's like 5 of you down there. All of world history is up here. We're going to talk about us up here. You can put it together for yourselves. But in the Northern Hemisphere, when the sun's in Aquarius, people aren't getting their vitamin D. They're not going out as much. It's after holiday season. There's kind of like just this low energy that's typically happening with the sun in Aquarius. However, with the full moon, the moon is about illuminating the night and it's about illuminating the dark. The things that are kind of hidden from us become seen. They become illuminated. And this is in Leo. We're talking about pride. We're talking about ego. We're talking about like just bombastic, audacious personality stuff. And so we start this month off, now that Neptune's in Aries with this full moon in Leo, of feeling like, all right, I've got this pride. I've got this courageousness. I don't have this fear going into what I'm going into. And I think that's really fun. Same thing too. All of the planets really are in Aquarius right now anyway, which I don't mind Mercury in Aquarius. I don't really mind Venus or Mars in Aquarius, to be honest with you. They're pretty fun transits. It's mostly about like connecting with other people, being a little bit more disconnected in that sense, though. It's kind of like when you go to like a party or something, and it's like you kind of know everybody there. They're kind of your acquaintance. You call them your friends. They're not really your friends. You just kind of exist in the same space at the same time. So there's that kind of quasi connection with Aquarius is the way that I would look at it. Same thing with like, here in Vegas, would I call anybody in Vegas like a neighbor or anything like that? Like, no, not necessarily. But if I'm out in the world somewhere, like let's say I'm in, Thailand for whatever reason, and I meet someone else from from Vegas, it's like all of a sudden we're super connected. Like that's how the Aquarius connection kind of works. It's connections that are a little bit more outside of the realm of like interpersonal connections. But Mercury's there, Venus is there, Mars is there. So a lot more mental focus on it, a lot more fun and value is added to that. But Mars, there's going to be a little bit more drama and problems that come with that. And with the sun in Aquarius, we just have this low energy that we don't want to deal with when it comes to that stuff. But this full moon in Leo is really the opportunity to go like, okay, I'm connected with people? Do you need to maybe charge up that social battery? Maybe your social battery is a little bit drained. But I look at this full moon in Leo as like an opportunity to connect more with people and to like give yourself that sense of confidence. Like, have you ever been like down on the dumps or like in your own shit? And then you kind of like, you go back out, you socialize, you connect, and you kind of realize you're like, wait a minute, I'm goated. Wait a minute, I am that guy. That's what this full moon is really about. So as we are getting off this new moon in Capricorn and building up to this full moon, you're going to start feeling that sense of confidence build up and up and up until we get to this moment. So as we get to the first, I want you to like remember that the full moon is really about like feeling confident. If you are in a situation in which confidence is not existing, that is your signal. This might be a realization of like, wow, I don't actually have the confidence I should have. I don't actually feel the pride or the courageousness or like the heart coming from anything that I'm doing right now. That is a signal that you should be listening to. And that might give you more information to maybe make changes in your life. What should you be doing? Because this is about coming from that place. And if you're not coming from that place, you're going to really notice it here. So full moon in Leo, the next transit that we have going on is on the 4th. We have Uranus stationing direct. Look, you guys know me. I'm not the biggest Uranus or even Pluto for that matter stationing direct or retrograde. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not as big of a deal. I even taught about this in my aspects course, in my planetary cycles course. Uranus and Neptune and Pluto are retrograde for, what is it, a third or is it two? It's either 1/3 or 2/3 of the year. So realistically, how much can you really put into that? I think you can make the argument that the days that those that they shift are maybe a little bit more important. But Uranus does station direct. I think what's more important is if you are someone who is a Taurus rising, Scorpio rising, Leo rising, like a fixed sign, or you have a planet at the later degrees of a fixed zodiac sign, I think you'll be feeling this probably the most. But as Uranus has been kind of retrograde, it's a little bit more of instability kind of coming more within and not so without. The way that retrograde planets work is a planet being direct is kind of like exerting itself into the world versus a planet going retrograde is kind of coming within. Again, it's that yin yang dynamic. As Uranus stations direct, it's more of the outside world that will be a little bit more unpredictable or a little bit more chaotic, not so much internalizing all of the kind of problems, if that makes sense. You'll be a little bit more okay and you won't be as like spiraling off over little tiny things, but like just the world is going to be throwing stuff at you that's a little bit more, chaotic and unpredictable. But what is also really important here too is we're almost done with Uranus and Taurus. Now that Neptune's in Aries, Pluto's in Aquarius, it's just Uranus and Gemini. And that's when we get to this fire and air stuff. And the big thing to really understand is we are going from a long transition of Pluto in an earth sign, Neptune in a water sign, Uranus in a earth sign, and Saturn was in a water sign for a long time. And water and earth are very yin. They're very feminine. They're very about, okay, how do we feel? What is close to us? Versus yang, the masculine, is much more about exertion. It's much more about what ignites us. It's so funny being a guy. And when you're just riddled with testosterone, doing stuff makes you feel better. Like, it's so funny. The other day I was like scrolling and I was like, I hate this and I'm not enjoying anything. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll get work done. And then I got some work done. And I was like, I instantly felt amazing. And that's kind of what the vibe shift is right now, is going less and less more interpersonal and more exerting, more and more outside focused, more and more accomplishing, more and more, when you think about the fire stuff too, I've said this before, but a lot of the ancient astrology people really talked about the fire signs as emotional signs. And I think of, if I were to kind of pick that apart, I think a lot about the fire signs and emotion as passion, as like a yearning or like a lustfulness. And as we have these outer planets, which are much more about the, for example, Neptune is kind of about the current mythos that society is kind of, going under at any given point. And for example, last year when Neptune left Pisces and went into Aries, there was a lot of, news people kind of talking about like the death of woke and going into like the more red pill kind of stuff. I'm a little bit more open as to what that looks like now, but the way that you can read that with just Neptune is going from more about personal feelings or sympathy or empathy and more about just like aggression. That is the mythos that we're going to be going under really for the next 15 years. That's going to look different in so many different ways, if that makes sense. Like, it's not just about like, oh, this is just what like the media is projecting. It's more so about like, okay, what does that look like in food? What does that look like, again, sure, in politics, but in the economy, in your own personal life, in what technology is produced, in what your friends are saying or what your friends are into. That's the kind of thing that you have to look for. And so as Neptune goes into Aries, if you're feeling that sort of like, all right, I need to push forward, I need to do something, I need to get excited, it's really that. And as we get to Uranus stationing direct, look, it's not that big of a deal. I would just argue that this is one little tick into things kind of moving forward. A lot of forward movement is going on over the next really few weeks and for the next few months. Nothing really slows down until about July, I would say, maybe even September. It is just all forward movement here besides a couple Mercury retrogrades along the way. We get to the 5th. On the 5th, we're going to be having Mercury make a square to Uranus. All right. So are we looking at the 5th? Yeah, we're looking at the 5th here. Mercury, Uranus. There's nothing that you can really do. This is the thing that I've really observed with astrology is, for example, with Mercury squaring Uranus, I could sit here and say, watch your words. You don't know what you're going to say. Don't change your iCloud details and fuck up your computer like I did. There's just a lot of things that you can't really do anything about. And the only thing you can do is just make it like less bad for yourself. And what I mean by this is Mercury's communication. Mercury is our thoughts. Mercury rules so many things in our lives nowadays because we're so technology focused. So when it comes to like things like email, communication, just all of it, there's going to be some disruptions. What does disruptions look like? Mercury in Aquarius, it's like, what's the crowd talking about? And Uranus and Taurus is like, stability. Try not to get into online fights. Try not to let shit trigger you. I think another thing is just kind of expect some disruptions here on the 5th. What day is this? I believe this is going to be on a Thursday. So Thursday the 5th, Mercury squares Uranus. There's just going to be some disruptions with how you communicate. Let it slide off. Let it roll off. I think what it's not good for either is forcing things. Like Mercury squaring Uranus is like, let me just, when your computer's not working or you're trying to get your point across, it's just not working. You're just making it worse and worse and worse, but you're so stubborn that you just try to force it. That's like what this is, and it's not going to work. So if you feel that sense of like, oh, I just got to force it. Oh, let me just try harder. Don't do that. Just trust me when I say don't do that. You'll thank me later. Plus, this upcoming Mercury retrograde that we have is honestly so fucking terrible that I want it to be a little bit easier for you guys rather than more difficult. That brings us to our next point, which is Mercury going into Pisces. Okay. Mercury goes into Pisces. I think theoretically it's whatever. Here we go. But here's the deal. Mercury's going to go retrograde in Pisces on the North Node in the middle of eclipses. I've said this so many times before, and what's difficult is I say everything like right here, and so I don't know who I said it to, when I said it, or how I said it. But a really good example of Mercury retrograde in Pisces was literally like March of 2020. In March of 2020, Mercury stationed retrograde in Pisces on top of Neptune, and the way I've looked at how that manifested was every single day when COVID hit was Trump and Fauci going up on stage. Every single day they would change their opinions, and every single day Trump would say one thing and then Fauci would say the opposite, and then vice versa. All that is to say, what they said those first few weeks of the pandemic, it's like it didn't matter. Like it was just, it changed all the time. It wasn't really real. And people are like, don't overthink what I'm saying here. Why I'm saying that now is as Mercury is retrograde in Pisces, whatever anyone says, whatever you're thinking about, it's like, it's not real. You're going to have to just let yourself and let your thoughts be fluid and not hold on to things. The problem is Mercury is going to be making its way towards the North Node, which is the way I've always talked about Mercury. Like if Mercury in Virgo is a document, it's black and white text, it's Times New Roman, it's super easy to read, it's very clear, it's grammatically correct. Mercury in Pisces is like reading someone, writing a message with like a highlighter on their palm and delivering it to you and they're drunk. Like you kind of have to read between the lines. You kind of have to pick up what they're putting down. You have to kind of pick up more of the vibe and more of the what's the word, like unspoken communication, not body movement, but like just unspoken communication with it. But as when Mercury's on the North Node, it's going to make it louder. The wrong information, the miscommunications, the, oh, I said this, but I didn't really mean that, and it changed here. It's just going to be really, really loud and turned up. This month, I think, is going to separate the boys from the men in terms of like who can just let stuff roll off their back. And especially too, if you're one of those people that's caught up in the news, you're going to have a really stressful month. And the people who are going to have great months are going to just not really care about how things go. Plans change, communication change, facts, details change. And Pisces is a mutable sign. It's all about change and adaptability. And Pisces is so fluid and so like, well, it might be this and it might be that. And one day I feel like this and one day I feel like that. The best way to go about this Mercury retrograde in Pisces, or I should just say, and this really, Mercury doesn't enter shadow yet, but the vibe is here at this point as Mercury goes into Pisces. You're just going to have to not hold on to words or ideas or plans that tightly. You're just going to have to be able to roll with the punches. And I think if you are more open and adaptable right now, you are going to get ahead. If you are fixed and rigid and it has to look this way, you're probably going to have a brain aneurysm and you'll probably explode. At dinner with your family, you're just going to spontaneously combust and then you die. And they're going to wonder why did my parent just combust? And everyone's going to say he fucking took life too seriously during a Mercury retrograde in Pisces. And it's going to be sad. Everyone's going to miss you. But the real winners are not going to hold on to things that much. And we're just going to let things go in one year and it's going to go out the other, because that's the only way to do this time. I'm telling you right now. I've been looking to all the future astrology for all the future years, and I looked at this, like this Mercury retrograde is like, it's really silly because besides the Mercury retrograde, it's a really serious time. Like everything is super serious except for this. So it's one of those things where I think to have success this month, really be open to being adaptable. This is not about, I have my plan and I'm sticking to it no matter what. It's about being able to change and adapt and go with the times. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really difficult. So that's on the 7th here. We're going to get to the 8th, or my bad, that's on the 6th. We get to the 8th. Venus makes a square to Uranus. I don't mind Venus-Uranus squares. I think they're fun. This is definitely one of those things where you're like, I want to try this new thing, and maybe you like it and maybe you don't. I don't want to call myself a picky eater, but it's rare I try new things. I only like doing it in certain contexts. And not too long ago, I don't even remember what I was doing or where I was. It's just that maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was all fake. But I had squid and it wasn't bad. I was like, it was pretty good. And I'm not a fish person at all. But Venus, pleasure, value. If you are in a relationship, or if you're one of those people that is on relationship Instagram and every single post is telling you this or that, you're going to lose your mind on this day. What I would really suggest is like relationships might be a little bit more conflict oriented. There might be some information or some, especially with it being Aquarius, some social situations that disrupt the cohesion or the fun or the pleasure. Now, if you are planning ahead with the astrology, this is going to be on Sunday, February 8th. Venus squaring Uranus. It's a good day to try something new. You don't have to like it. You may not like it. But what I've learned with astrology is that this stuff is just going to happen. And it's whether or not you give it space to happen, or you are like, for example, let's say you're getting married on Sunday, February 8th, and you're one of those brides that are like, if anything does not go exactly the way that I want on my wedding day, I'm going to literally blow my brains out in front of everybody. Everyone's going to see you blow your brains out, and it's not going to be all that fun. You've got to be adaptable during this time, especially when it comes to beauty, fun, pleasure. And so try to let it loose. Try to be, again, adaptable, flexible. This is not an adaptable or flexible transit. But relationships will be a little bit disruptive, a little bit more chaotic. Maybe trying new things is a good way to look at it. But at the end of the day, it's not that deep. So Venus then goes into Pisces. This is probably, I don't know if I would call this the silver lining of this month, but it is kind of interesting. It's one of those things where, have you ever been in like, This happens to me more often than not, where I'm in a situation, let's say like, I don't know, I'm at the DMV or I'm like in public somewhere and I'm like mad or frustrated. Everyone's pissing me off. And then like somewhere in the corner, there's like a kid just doing something goofy, just like, and it's just hard not to laugh at whatever the kid is doing. And no one's like paying attention. Like I was at In-N-Out and there's this kid went to the drink section and just busted out the coloring book and laid down on the mat, the gross, disgusting mat where the fountain drinks were, and was just like drawing, and no one fucking gave a fuck, and especially the parents. And there's just something like, what the fuck are you doing, stupid little kid? But whatever. I think with Venus going into Pisces is there's a lot of serious stuff going on this month, and there's still an opportunity though for a little corner of your life to be really fun and pleasurable. You know, and Venus in Pisces is not so strict or limited about what pleasure or fun looks like. You know, Venus is exalted in Pisces. And right now we're going to be having Venus exalted, Jupiter exalted. Both of the benefic planets are really doing good. And so what this month is really good for is saying, you know what? I've got a lot of serious stuff going on in my life. I'm making a lot of big pivotal changes. Yeah, it's a little bit hardcore, but you know what? I'm not letting my mind be so stuck on these issues that don't matter at the end of the day. And whatever fun is available to me, whatever pleasure, whatever abundance is available to me, I'm going to just like say yes to it. This is a really good month to say yes to a lot of things. And yeah, there's this eclipse season coming up here. Yeah, it's a little bit, you know, all over the place, but like Venus is about connecting. And in Pisces, she's like, so I always say this, and I got to start coming up with new analogies at some point in my life, but it's just how it is. It's like very manic pixie dream girl, very rave girl. That's like, you know, maybe she's like some Nepo baby and on ketamine, and she's just like, nothing in her world is wrong. And you're kind of like, how do you exist? Like, how do you pay rent? You know those people. That's how Venus in Pisces is. That Nepo baby, you know, rich, cute, like rave girl energy is available to you. If you want to embody that, that is available to you this month. As Venus goes into Pisces again, this is going to be on Tuesday, February 10th. Excuse me. I think it's going to be a lot more easy to enjoy things. And I really liked how I said it a minute ago. There is a pocket in a corner of your life where even though things are serious, even though you got stuff going on, and sure, you might be winning, you might be losing, there's still opportunities to have a lot more fun. I think with relationships, things get easier to have pleasure. That's very Venus in Pisces, but it doesn't make sense. Do not bring up the what are we conversation this month, okay? It's not going to work. Even if you're married. Do you guys do married women do that? Are you guys ever like to your husband of like 15 years, like, what are we? That's something I feel like I would say. What are we doing here? Something I always ask is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I ask that to literally everybody. And I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, so Mercury's in Pisces. Look, it's not going to be clear. It's not going to make sense. But Venus is in Pisces. We're having a good time anyway. And that's the way to go about this month, at least up to this point, is Venus in Aquarius. We've had our little connections and our group meetups, and we know what side of the fence we're on. And yeah, but as Venus goes into Pisces, it's like, I don't care about that stuff anymore. I just want to like have my fun and do my work. That's really what this month is about. So I'm excited for Venus and Pisces, especially just because both benefics are exalted this month. Like we're not going to have anything like that for, gosh, a while, until what, Jupiter goes into Sagittarius in 2030 or 2031, something like that. But when Jupiter, we only have a little bit of time left while Jupiter's in Cancer. Venus, Jupiter is exalted. Venus will be exalted. Venus will trine Jupiter. We're going to get to that in just a minute. You owe it to yourself to find some sort of, again, maybe the right word is a silver lining, but wherever the water zodiac signs rule in your chart, maybe it's your first, your fifth, and your ninth house. Maybe it's your second and your sixth and your 10th house, whatever it is. That's what is going to be really, really good. And allow yourself to enjoy it, or allow yourself to indulge in it and feel good is the easiest way to put it. So we have that. Venus goes into Pisces. And then on the 11th, Mercury is going to enter shadow and conjoin the North Node. Do not ask the what are we converse. That is like I'm giving myself multiple titles for this month. Maybe a title for the horoscope for this month is what are we? What are we? And no one's gonna be happy, you're right. So Mercury enters shadow. On this day, on February 11th, Wednesday, February 11th, write that down. Whoops, let's do that. Wednesday, February 11th. Someone is going to say something, or you might get a letter in the mail, or you get an email, or you have a stupid thought because you're so silly and you can't shut that thing up in there. And you're going to want to decipher its meaning. You're going to want it to make it make sense. And because it's on the North Node, you are hyper obsessing over it. Like Mercury and Pisces, all right, everybody take their first shot of the video. Cameron's bringing up a drug analogy. This is like 3 a.m. We're racking out the lines and someone brings up the business they want to start, or that we should all start a business together. And then for the next hour and a half, it's, yeah, blah, blah, blah. That's Mercury in Pisces conjoining the North Node. It's like, yeah, this conversation's super intense, but we know it's not going anywhere. Yeah, that's a good idea. I feel that way. Well, what if we did this? And, what if we had special places for dogs that were emotional support animals and like that. That's kind of the vibe here. And then, you stay up till 7, 8 in the morning. And then you go to bed, you wake up at 4 p.m. and you're like, you don't even remember the business conversation. Then you're like, why did I spend $100 on a gram just to have a fake business conversation with these people I'm not even really friends with? That's what this is. If you don't like that experience, you have to know when to go home. When they start racking out the lines, go home. I say this because Mercury's about communication, and communication is so important, especially even in relationships. And Mercury does not have the words right now. Mercury has the vibe. Mercury can definitely be charming and be really witty and be really open. And that's something I really like about Mercury and Pisces, that it's a really good time to converse in a space where the words are taken with a grain of salt. Oftentimes I feel like the majority of the time in life, we take people's words so seriously. And I think that's important. I think we should be that way. But it is important to have times where you can just freely express, and it's okay if, maybe you don't express it the right way, Like maybe you're trying to communicate an opinion about something, and the people that are really cool know how to have room for nuance. And then the people who aren't cool are like, did you really just say that? That with Mercury being in Pisces, you have to just be open with things. The big thing that I would really watch out for is, number one, this is on the 11th, where this day indicates something. A conversation is said, an idea comes up. You get an email, you get some sort of an update. There's some sort of an announcement of some sort. And on the North Node, with it being on the North Node, it is going to feel like an emergency. It's going to feel like you know exactly what to do, or that you have to do it. Like you're feeling this impulsive decision to do it. For anyone who's done home projects, you're just going to get that feeling of like, you know what, that backsplash, that tile, I'm curious. Let me see what's behind that backsplash. And then before you know it, your drywall's taken down, you're redoing the cabinets, and you budgeted 15 grand for the kitchen reno, and guess what? It's 40. That's what's going to happen. You got to be careful with this Mercury retrograde, and allow yourself to be curious, allow yourself to be fun. But the big thing is that it is not an emergency. Try to slow yourself down a little bit. With Mercury in detriment on the North Node, know that whatever you're into right now or whatever you're thinking about, it's just a fleeting thought, even if it feels really impulsive and really important. And if you need to lean into that, just take it with a grain of salt, because people are going to be yelling at you. This is one of those things where it's like being on the internet, where the loudest people about whatever topic usually don't know what they're talking about. And they're really, really loud about it. That's what this vibe is here. And again, just like COVID, a lot of people are going to be really loud about a lot of things, and you just can't take it personally, and you're just going to have to ignore it for the most part. That is going to show up so much this month. And coming back to the whole thing of what are we? Look over there. That's what I'd say. Oh, what's in my pocket? That's how you got to go about this Mercury retrograde of let's not make sense of anything right now, because nothing makes sense. Okay. So Then Mercury enters shadow. Mercury conjoins the North Node. We're going to come back to this. That's the big thing is Mercury's going to go into shadow. It's going to go retrograde. It's going to come right back to here. And you're going to have to be like, why did I say that? Did I really say that? What? I mean, I didn't mean we could do that. You've got to just know that whatever's happening here, you're going to come back to anyway. And number one, if it's something happening to you, take it with a grain of salt. Don't stress about it. It's going to feel like you have to respond and do something right then and there. You may not have to. Try to be patient with it. And it's probably not the end of the world because something might get miscommunicated. Like I went through something a couple years ago that was like, I thought I was like, it was like, oh, if you don't do this in 48 hours, like something bad's going to happen. And then it was like a miscommunication on whoever I was talking to's part. And they're like, oh, it's actually not that big of a deal. And you're like, oh, okay. So you're going to come back to this. I don't want you to freak out or stress during this time, even though it's going to feel very confusing. Okay. What the Pisces stuff is good for is having fun. We're just being silly today. And we're not being that serious. So if you are catching yourself being serious, you're losing the plot. So that brings us to the 13th. Now Saturn goes into Aries. Now shit's fucking real. Okay? Then after that, the sun's going to square Uranus. Mercury's going to trine Jupiter. We're going to get into that. Oh my gosh, these stupid buttons. There we go. All right, let's talk about Saturn going into Aries on February 13th. We're just going to fast forward to the 14th here. So we're on the 14th. All right. This is where shit's fucking real. Like I said, the vibe of this month is super serious shit is happening, and we're just having a goofy, fun old time. Do you have the capacity to do both of those things? So Saturn and Aries. Rule number 1, bite off more than you can chew. Rule number 2, find out whatever rules exist and break all of them because they're fucking gay. Rule number 3, do it all of yourself. Will all of these things be the best path forward? No. Will all of these things make your dreams come true? Probably not. Are you going to regret doing all 3 of these things? Yes. But do you have to do it anyway? Yes. That's Saturn and Aries. Saturn is about time, patience, maturity. And in Aries, well, you gotta have to grow up pretty young. You have to, or I should say, grow up pretty fucking quick. Saturn wants more patience and Aries wants more now. Aries is very impatient. So how do you hold space? How do you navigate your life when something needs to be handled right here, right now? And maybe you don't have the time or the resources to do it, but you have to do it anyway. Saturn and Aries, I think another way to look at it is, for example, I had 3,000 of you sign up for my 90-day new identity program. What was going on for you? The end of May, I think it was May 25th of 2025. We're coming right back to that. Last summer was our sneak preview into 2026. And now we're here. We're not going back to Pisces stuff. Sorry, that was a burp. We're only going into Aries stuff. And whatever, and the thing I keep thinking about is just how much shifted at the end of May and the beginning of June. Jupiter moved into Cancer, Uranus moved into Gemini, and Saturn and Neptune both went into Aries. There's so much to really kind of dive into, and we'll talk, let's talk about the Saturn-Neptune thing in a second. Let's just talk about Saturn for right now. Impatience, boldness. My favorite thing about, because I'm a Saturn in Aries too. My favorite thing about Saturn being a Saturn in Aries is I've never told myself, oh, I can't do that. And when I tried to do the things I told myself I couldn't do, it's like if I don't do it, it's because I don't want to, not that I couldn't do it. And I slowly realize I end up doing more than what is necessary, and I have to put in more effort, and I have more responsibility or more loose ends that need to be tied up than what I need to. Saturn in Aries is going to work better when you're on your feet and when you're light. What does that mean? If you are, for example, let's say you're flying to New Orleans with your girls for a weekend, and because it's just how the way the world works, you pack seven checked bags of bullshit for a 3-day weekend, you're going to have a worse time. You have all these different options around what clothes do I wear, what outfits, my curling iron, all of this stuff. It's not going to work out well. Saturn in Aries is about restricting it down to essentially what you can do. Saturn is in its sign of fall. So Saturn wants structure. Saturn wants time. Saturn wants rules. That's where Saturn does its job really well. But the idea of a fallen planet is it's like, oh, you just lost all that. Now what are you going to do? Versus Saturn in detriment, the difference between fall and detriment is literally like a planet falling versus like being stuck somewhere. A planet exalted is on like the come up. Like, yeah, like this is who's a celebrity that's recently is like falling down, like it's not doing good. They're in their cancellation phase. That's kind of like Saturn here. So when it comes to being patient, when it comes to having rules or systems locked in, you have to be flexible, and you have to be willing to only take on what you know for a fact you could take on independently. I think Saturn, and again, I would really just, if you really want to know what this is going to be about, really just think about what Saturn, or what I should say is, let's say May. How do I do this? It's hard to draw on the iPad because it's like vertical. So I'm like this versus like this. May through August. What was that time like for you? We're coming back to that. What house is it going in for you? We're going to talk about the Neptune stuff here in just a second. And I think that's important because we really can't talk about Saturn without talking about Neptune. But I just wanted to talk about that for just a brief moment. There we go. So Saturn enters Aries, and really the big thing is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is 7 days after that. So 7 days, a week later. Is that the Deftones song? Is it 7 days or is it 7 months? I think it's 7 days. It's like one of my favorite Deftones songs. Sun Square Uranus. Not the worst. I got to get better at these buttons. Sorry, this is my first time doing this setup. So, Sun in Aquarius, squaring Uranus in Taurus. This is one of those things where you're already feeling low. You're already feeling a little exhausted, and then a bird just comes and shits on you. So what I like about Saturn and the sun's relationship is the sun is in detriment right now. It just doesn't have that like energy or that passion. So the sun has to rely on the systems. For example, in the winter, when there's no berries, when there's, when it's cold out, you have to rely on your community. I'm speaking in a like an evolutionary sense, in an ancestral sense. When we didn't have the sense of agency on our own, you had to rely on your community. That's what it was there for. It's for the hard times. While the sun's in detriment Aquarius, if you don't have that willpower, that's okay. That's what your systems are for. And so the sun is very reliant on Saturn right now. And Saturn just moved into Aries, where maybe this is what always happens with astrology, is right when you get in the flow of whatever planet is transiting whatever zodiac sign, is like right before it moves. Like right when you're like, I'm getting this Saturn and Pisces thing, it goes into Aries. But I think as Saturn goes into Aries, and the sun, which is at this low energy, it's kind of really reliant on systems and on some sort of stability, that moves. We then have the sun squaring Uranus, where there's going to be some disruption to our own willpower, to our own vitality, to our own even sense of energy. This is why I use the example of like, you're already not feeling all too good. It's not the best day. It's not the worst day, but you're just kind of in your head. And then, I don't know, you're walking down the street and a car just drives by a puddle and splashes you. And you're like, great. That's kind of what's going on here. I think another thing is this is very unhinged behavior. The sun squaring Uranus is like, you know what? Let me just buzz my hair. You know what? Why do girls do these short bangs? Like they'll have like nice pretty bangs, and then they do like that. Just to me is like, what happened? Like, because someone did not cook here. But anyway, that's kind of what that is feeling the impulse based off of a low energy state to do something a little erratic. That may be what you need, but that may also not be what you need. And you don't realize it until you do it. It's like, have you ever been like, I need to do this. I need to get this out of my system. And you do it and you're like, I regret doing that. That's the sun squaring Uranus. expect more disruption in terms of like your energy. And I think with the sun in the superior position here, this is kind of being more so of like not a random thing happening to you, but you being like, I'm feeling low energy, low confidence. Let me do something crazy to boost my confidence real quick. That's what's kind of going on here. I think that's really good for if you're leaning into the Saturn and Aries thing, which is going to be more about that fire, that tenacity, that audaciousness. But if you're in that low energy, weak state, that bitch state, I think you're going to feel a little impulsive to do things that aren't necessarily good for you. So, Sun squares Uranus. The Sun squares Uranus. Then we're going to have Venus conjoining the North Node. We're going to have Mercury trining Jupiter. And then after that, look at this shit. Venus conjoins the North Node as we have our first solar eclipse in Aquarius. I still don't understand the astrologers that keep saying Pluto in Aquarius is like power and community. It's like literally the opposite. It's literally like the community, what am I doing here? Is like super corrupted. But anyway, so Venus conjoins the North Node in Pisces. Have you ever had too much fun? Me either. You're going to really want to turn up the pleasure knob. You can go a little bit overboard. For example, you binge out on sweets, you binge out on drugs. You know, you can only go so many rounds in sex until, well, at least as a guy, you kind of start going, all right, I'm a little pooped. Venus is about that fun. And on the North Node, you know, what's really interesting is I kind of look at this as, you know, grief is a really weird thing where I always give people that are going through like a really hard time grieving, like they had a traumatic loss of some sort. Like you kind of have to give those people space with how they deal with it. Cause like you just kind of do weird shit. Like, it's like you try to fill an empty void because you don't know what you're really feeling. You know what I'm talking about? If you've experienced grief or you know people that experience grief, it's like you have to give them some space around processing that. They might do some crazy stuff. I say that because Venus on the North Node might be, there's this overwhelming sense of being uncomfortable that your only choice is to lean into pleasure. And we all know that could be kind of bad. We could be kind of doing stuff where we're really uncomfortable and then we're like, I'm going to binge out or I'm going to, chase some sort of a high, chase some sort of a dopamine, some pleasure. I would really watch out for that. However, what I would also say though, is that the urge is going to be there. And I don't think that's something to deny. I think though, if you are in a really stressful state, it can be easy to cope with this. And that might be for better or for worse. I don't think there's necessarily anything inherently wrong with coping, as long as you're like acknowledging that that's what you're doing. But I think if you're fucking locked in, you're ready, you've Saturn moved into Aries, you felt that vibe shift, now you're on lock. This is a sense of like being able to actually enjoy yourself. And it's kind of like, rather than just going out for a weekend, you end up doing something a little bit crazy or something a little bit more fun, that you weren't expecting. And it's a lot more pleasurable and fun than you thought. Those are always the best moments in life too, when it's like, I'm going to do something fun and it's way more fun than you thought because you just like said yes to life. So I really like this. What I would argue though, because we're all individual, unique human beings, we're all experiencing the same energy, but completely, it affects us completely differently. So depending on what you resonated with what I said is really, how to kind of navigate this, but just know the urgency and the sense of pleasure and fun, especially relationships. Like Mercury's in detriment here, what's a good example? I have too many, I don't say I have too many women followers, but I'm trying to think of like because like a guy, for example, would like go to like Colombia and meet some woman or and be like, yes, I want you to marry me, be my wife, move with me. What's like the woman equivalent to that of like, who does she meet? What kind of a guy does she just like, you know what, fuck it. Yeah. Is it like the guy with like the married guy? I feel like that's a trope, but I don't know. That's the energy here where it's like, this just feels so good and feels so right. I don't care if it does. I don't care if it makes sense. And I don't think that's a bad way to look at it, to be honest with you. But we get to the eclipse here in Aquarius. So it's hard to talk about this without talking about how the world's going to look, because we're all online and the system has become digitized so much that they're pretty much starting to get ready to flip on that little, digital ID, stuff. And it's so funny, if you don't know anything about digital ID, you don't have an opinion about it, fine, that's not a matter. But a lot of people get really pissed off about it. And rightfully so, but there's I'm having so many issues logging in. I have so many emails and passwords where lately I've just been and I have to do 2-factor authentication. Then I get a text code and then this, and then, I'm getting these text messages that someone's trying to get into my link account. And it's just I'm ready for the digital ID. I'm ready for the digital ID. If it means I don't ever have to log in again, if it means I never have to get a text of a code to put into this thing, and then, Gmail is what number is on the screen on your thing. And, if I never have to do that, put me on the digital control grid. At this point, I'm almost ready for it. But eclipses are about emergency events, number one. So coming back to the Venus North Node conjunction, try not to overdo it, because I think it could get a little far, again, especially if you're coping. But the big thing here is eclipses feel like these emergency events that you have to do something for. And what that is the universe presenting you an opportunity to say, hey, you want to change your life? Do you want to change your life right now? Are you feeling a certain way? You know what? Fuck it. Fuck it. Pull my finger. Do you want to change your life real quick? And you don't have to pull the universe's finger. You don't. But as someone who has ignored eclipses successfully, where nothing happened, and I was like, whoa, that really felt real. And as someone who has pulled the finger of the universe and it completely changed my life, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse, I've learned that it's really an option. And this is on the North Node, where the South Node is much more of I got to get rid of this. I'm tired of this. I got to move past this. And sometimes the South Node is this is coming back up again. I got to deal with this now. The North Node is let's do more. Let's move to this next phase. Let's move to this next thing. It's your choice. It really is your choice, but this is in Aquarius. On a societal level, I think there is, because the thing I'm really looking at is eventually the North Node is going to start conjoining Pluto in Aquarius, which is very the internet's going to start getting a little bad. And society and, politics, as you already fucking see. But I think a lot about if Aquarius is things like the internet, and the internet is not just a place that you go to anymore. It is a infrastructure in which you live and operate in. It's kind of if they all just decided here in America that you no longer drive on the right side of the road, you drive on the left side. You're okay, that doesn't really affect me in my house, but when I go out, it's fuck, how do I gotta drive on the left side now? That's totally disorienting me. That's how I kind of think of the internet in a lot of ways, where I think you'll start to see some subtle, bigger shifts here. And I kind of talk about this in the live stream that I did about my geopolitical predictions. But look at whatever house Aquarius rules for you. And as the North Node is not in, that looks a little inappropriate. Let's give that a different shape. How do you draw the North Node? There we go. The North Node is this compelling force. The North Node is not in Aquarius yet. It will be over the summer. And this is going to give us that sneak preview as to what's coming up this summer. In your chart, you're going to start moving towards that Aquarius part of your chart, whatever house it rules in your chart. And you're just going to start moving past a little bit more of the Leo stuff. There's going to be less emphasis on, individuality, grandiose natures, and more communal, tribal, societal connections. And I think that looks a lot of different ways. And that really does start here, especially too, as we have this eclipse in Aquarius with the Saturn Neptune conjunction. This is just where it's oh yeah, you're kind of forced to get onto the digital ID thing, is the way that I just keep reading this. I struggled to see a different realistic way it looks. But the thing I want you to keep in mind is Mercury's in shadow during an eclipse. Nothing makes sense right now. Mercury's not even retrograde. The communication's unclear. And yet here is this moment where you feel as if you have to make an emergency decision. You have to cut off something. What I would also argue is sometimes you get eclipsed. Sometimes things happen to you that you didn't anticipate. Look at your chart. Whatever house that rules, that's the area of your life it's going to look into. But this is where we start entering eclipse season, which is the weird 2 weeks of every 6 months where everything is just really weird and up in the air and feels very anxious ridden. So what I want to come back to is it's going to feel as if you have to make an emergency decision. Mercury's in Pisces. It's in detriment. It's slowing down. You don't have all the information. Like, I would really suggest not, if you have an idea of what you're doing, try not to make the craziest impulsive decision. However, life's fun. I think life is really fun. And I think this is an opportunity where you might get the opportunity to make a big decision, make a big change. And I think eclipses are great times to say, you know what, fuck it. Let me rip up my life real quick. Now, if you do that, it's still not going to make sense. It's still not, you're not going to have it all figured out just because you decided to upend everything. But this is kind of that time. So things start to get weird around here, okay? So Venus conjoins the North Node. We have the solar eclipse. That's on the 17th. Then the sun goes into Pisces on the 18th. Really not that big of a deal, but what is nice is slightly more chill. You know, the sun is no longer in detriment, but the sun is on the North Node. Now we're getting into this, you know, more of the actual eclipse energy with the North Node being in Pisces. I just think the sun getting out of detriment is going to start feeling good. And look, we're almost at spring. We're 30 days away from spring at this point, and it's February. 2026 is going to go by pretty fast. And, you know, not to be all Ferris Bueller on you, but like, if you don't look around, you know, you might miss it. So sun goes into Pisces. All right, let's talk about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. This is where we really start talking. Oops. So I love that this happens in between eclipse season because a lot of people live in this constant state of negativity and fear, as in, look at the economy, look at the cost of living, and you get to be correct. Like, you're right. Like, but why would you willingly mold your reality for you to only look at the things? Because all we do as human beings is we look for things that make us right, that reiterate our beliefs. Saturn's about reality. Neptune's about idealization, fantasies, and illusions. As Saturn conjoins Neptune, for some people, this is going to be some reality crashing down on your dreams. For other people, or I shouldn't say, maybe you realize what you thought was realistic wasn't. And for other people, there's an opportunity to carve out what they want their reality to look like. As AI progresses and, you know, for example, I like listening to, like, so a lot of people for right now are talking about like the death of culture, and like the death of music. And I don't find that to be actually the case. I think how culture is actually going to work is that it fragments into these groups where, for example, in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, there was this kind of collective culture that everyone could agree upon as what was trending or what was in whatever, versus because of the internet and AI and the use and how accessible tools are, I think we're going to start slowly creating our own pockets of reality. I think that's already been happening, but I think it'll become louder. And what I mean by that is you just get the opportunity here to really ask yourself, what do I want my reality to look like? What do I do? Like Saturn and Neptune and Pisces were like, how do I feel? What's stuck inside of me? This is the part, like this is the time in the 90s where we stopped going from like emo, like Nirvana music to like Limp Bizkit, where we're just going to be silly and goofy and break shit and drink our hot dog water. You've got to get out of, if you are in some sort of sadness right now, I think the good news is that does go away. I think it turns into anger. As you can kind of see, the world's going to get more and more angry and stuff like that. But Neptune, Pisces is so much about like how we feel and the depths of the inside. And Neptune's like, what does it mean? And we should be more open and friendly. And Saturn's like, no, we shouldn't. And Neptune in Aries is so much of like, who am I? What am I? And what do I do? And I think Saturn going into Aries is showing you like who you are by showing you what you can't do. Like a lot of Saturn in Aries is going to, over the next few years, is going to be like, you can't fucking do that, actually. You can't fucking do that. Yeah, when you have Saturn in Aries, you learn every lesson the hardest fucking way. Like it's literally just like, nope, we're going to make an example out of you. You're fucking punished. And you are going to realize what you can't do. In my opinion, I think there is so much beauty in being like it's real. For example, have you ever heard that saying? There's a missile. I don't remember if it's a HIMARS missile or there's some missile on a plane where it's this heat tracking missile, and the missile knows where it's at because it knows where it's not. That's like a lot of Saturn and Neptune and Aries. You're going to realize a lot more about who you are and what you can do by getting real fucking clear, real quick about what you can't do. And if you are so worried about being told no about things, well, it's going to suck and you're going to throw a fit. Versus if you say, all right, I guess that's not for me, that only helps me be a little bit more clear about what is for me. I think with Saturn and Neptune, again, it also just depends on what house this is in for you, and what planets is it squaring or trining, and the whole spiel about your birth chart. But I think you have the opportunity here to bend reality. Because Saturn in Aries is like, you can't fucking do that. And Neptune is like, well, what if I could though? Or what could I do in that version of that? For example, it's like, if I'm limited to this perception, how can I idealize this identity, this perception in the best way possible? In the most aggressive way possible. And this is the other thing too. Something that I've realized about myself that's been really hard to understand that people aren't like this is like, I fight for everything. And I get, maybe some people don't feel that way. I think over the next few years, you guys are going to get a big taste of what it's like living in my birth chart, given all the fire and air in my stuff. But what I mean by that is you have the opportunity to ignite your discipline, your structure, and your routines, your wisdom through anger, through vengeance, through, and this is something that I can't, and maybe this is just because I'm a Gen Z young man, who we have a very specific perspective on how the world has been shaped for us to live through. Like, I'm taking what's mine. I'm doing what I want to do. And there's no for me, there's no like, oh, I'm just going to like manifest this and manifest that. It's like, I have this fire in me to do something about it. And I think with Saturn conjoining Neptune is like igniting that fire and like brandishing yourself almost. On one end of the spectrum, a Saturn conjoins Neptune, where maybe some of you were being too realistic or too idealistic, too up in the clouds. Reality is going to come crashing down where it says that's not for you. You can't do that. That's actually not what was going on. And that's going to be harsh. And that's life. You got to welcome it. Lately, if you've learned astrology from me, I teach a lot about contrasts. Reality is contrasts. That's it. I almost say that with like a emotionless tone nowadays because it's all I see. And the lows, whatever low you get to, just know its polar opposite exists. Does that make sense? So where you might have a moment where reality comes crashing down, you also might have a moment where you go, this Saturn and Aries, where I might feel limited, I might feel like it's too hard, I feel like I don't have enough time, I don't have the resources. Saturn and Aries on top of Neptune is going, you know what? I don't need that because I'm just going to do it anyway. It doesn't have to be, I don't need the fucking system. I don't need permission. I'm going to do it the way I want to fucking do it because my favorite story, I think throughout all of history, is Alexander the Great meeting the Oracle of Delphi. And this sounds like a bad story, but if you don't know it, Alexander's dad dies, he gets the throne, he goes to the Oracle of Delphi, these bitches that were huffing cave gas and spitting out, some psychic readings, essentially. And he goes to the Oracle of Delphi and he's like, hey, give me an oracle. And she's like, nah. She's like, I'm not really feeling anything. And he pretty much beats the shit out of her. And is like, you're going to give me a fucking oracle. She's like, what? You're going to be the greatest king that ever lived. And he was like, thank you. And went off and was the greatest king that ever lived. And the reason I like that story is because oftentimes in life, you get a signal. Let's say you're doing something and you get a signal that says stop. And you go, oh, I guess I should stop. Oh, I guess that's not for me. That's not what the universe wants. But you have to understand, like, as a human being, like, we are literally created in God's image. You don't have to listen. You can actually create the reality you want to live in. You actually can. You are not subject to the forces that you like just because something says something, why do you have to listen to it as if it's an authority? And that's why I like that story, is because, some of you might get a tarot card reading that says, oh, this is not going to work out for you. Or you might interpret your chart incorrectly that says, oh, this isn't going to work for you. It's not a good idea. You don't have to listen to that. You can go for what you want. You don't have to listen to the rules. It doesn't have to make sense. I don't care if you don't have the resources, the materials, the time, the patience, the know-how. Who gives a fuck? You could still do it. And yeah, it's going to be hard. It could also be fun. Sometimes my hardest days of work were also my most fun days of work. But I also have Saturn in the 5th house, so maybe I just like that shit. So as Saturn conjoins Neptune, I really want you to ask yourself, and also too, what's funny is it pretty much happens right as the moon conjoins Saturn and Neptune. So the moon's in Aries, we're charged up, we're feeling some type of way. Make sure you check in, because that Pisces shit is done. That having to figure it all out in our souls, having to understand, you don't need to understand shit. Like, that is, and again, if you're one of those people that are like, Cameron, but empathy and understanding is so important. I would agree it's important. But right now, it's about this. And for some of you, you might be really good at what this is. And for some of you, you might really struggle what this is. Depends on your chart, depends on you. So, that's Saturn, Neptune. Then we get, you know what I didn't even talk about? I didn't even talk about Mercury trining Jupiter. Mercury trining Jupiter is fine. I think it's really just, and again, this is here on the 16th before the eclipse. Mercury trining Jupiter is really just kind of like whatever we're communicating or thinking about is really helping us with our beliefs. And Jupiter's in Cancer, where we need a little bit more hope and faith. And I think it's a good time to fill up that hope and faith tank right now. And Mercury in Pisces is like, you know what? When I don't have to be logical about things, it actually makes it easier to have faith. That's exactly what that is. So we do get to the 22nd though. And on the 22nd is the Venus-Jupiter trine. I mean, talk about fun. Talk about Funville. I went to Funville and everyone was wondering where you were. I went to Droid Town and everyone said they missed you. I went to, super mega fun crazy land and they said that they're worried about you. They're wondering why you haven't been there yet. That's what's going on here. So both of the benefic planets are exalted. They're on the come up. We're remembering we're goated. And Venus is applying to Jupiter in the superior position, where what I look at is your ability to experience pleasure and fun and connection holistically. Because this is what I like about Venus and Pisces is gosh, how do you explain this? Like, have you ever had a relationship? And again, maybe this was a previous relationship for you. Maybe if you're lucky, it's like your current relationship. But like in certain relationships, you feel like there's these weird rules about being a human and intimacy that are like you don't know what to do. You feel dumb. And then there's other ones where you just feel like you can really be free. Venus and Pisces is good at that. It's like fun is just fun. And Venus trining Jupiter is like your ability to have fun, pleasure. And again, depending on where Venus is transiting in your chart, that's showing you where that's coming from. As she trines Jupiter, this is going to be uplifting your spirits, genuinely uplifting your spirits. The other thing to look at here too is Jupiter is at its exalted degree. And it's going to be here for a minute because Jupiter stations direct at its exalted degree. So Jupiter is prime. We love Jupiter right now. But coming back to what I was saying a moment ago, this month is really like two different pieces. We have this sense of working hard and taking things seriously, and then at the same time being able to like let go at the same time. And maybe it just requires us to fully let go to actually be serious. You ever thought about that one? So we like that. There we go. So Venus trines Jupiter, one of my favorite transits of the year. Great for a date, great for a fun night out, great for just whatever it is that you want to do. Then we get to the 26th. Mercury stations retrograde. And then look at the 27th. The sun conjoins the North Node, Mars squares Uranus, and Mercury, while it's retrograde, conjoins Venus. So let's talk about Mercury stationing retrograde. So that's the 22nd. Then we get to, really, it's the 26th. So a few days. Here we go. So like I said, Mercury entered shadow, where it's going to come back to. That was at about 8 degrees Pisces. It will come back to that. As it hit that degree, some information came in. It was confusing. It was overwhelming. You were uncertain about it. And then as Mercury went direct, or Mercury kept moving forward, it was just confusion, uncertainty. Now Mercury goes backwards. I have really understood through pain and suffering for 10 years of doing astrology. With Mercury retrogrades, you're just gonna have to go backwards a little bit. Sometimes in order to move forward, you got to go backwards. I've tried to force them. I've tried to keep moving forward. Doesn't work. So I'm recording this in January. From the day you're watching this to here, move forward. Get your shit done. From here, we reevaluate. We re-strategize. This is us writing the rough draft, and then by the time we get here, we start editing it. And we're being like, why did I say that? Or if maybe you're a part of my, you've seen my lectures and I always have a typo or grammatical error somewhere. Or I say, the new thing is I said epitome instead of epitome. I'm sorry, okay? Anyway, Mercury stations retrograde. And what's really interesting is the next day, Mercury will conjoin Venus in Pisces, where again, this is coming back to the, what are we? What is this? This is so good, but it's so confusing. I'm having so much fun, but I don't know what to say. I really want to do this, but I don't know if it makes sense. That's what's going on here. So Mercury being retrograde is again, miscommunications, slowdowns. Like I said, during this time, this is in between eclipses. So we just got done with the solar eclipse in Aquarius. Saturn conjoins Neptune during that time. Mercury goes retrograde during this time. I think in the news world, there's going to be a lot of chaos and everyone's going to be really confused on what's going on. And you just go, shh, I don't care. Shh. Because no one's going to know what's going on. And it's going to change every 5 minutes. And your mind's going to change every 5 minutes. You know, I remember my favorite moment during the pandemic was I was watching CNN. I think it was literally like the beginning of April. And I'm watching the news to be like, what's going on? You know, all this other stuff. And the CNN panels, they're like freaking out. And they're like, what about this? What about that? And there's just some guy being like, they asked him for his opinion. He's like, dude, that shit ain't going away until we get a vaccine. And I was like, that's exactly what's going to happen. And then I just checked out. And there was just like, during this time, there's going to be a lot of back and forth and your mind's going to be racing. Again, try not to take it too seriously. Try not to make it make sense because it's not going to make sense right now. And I think what this is a better time of looking at is because Mercury's with Venus is more of like, why do I like this? Why is this fun? Why is this pleasurable? Why do I want this? What are these little tiny things that I want? And again, something that I really do with my own mind is I think, okay, this is like what I want. And then I'll go like, I want it. You never have like the debate in your head where you're just like, I don't know, being a psychopath. But I'll be like, oh, I really like this. And this is my opinion on this for these reasons. And every time what I try to do is I try to go, what if it was the opposite? Like if I could sit here and look at it from the opposite perspective, like why wouldn't I like it? Why wouldn't that be a good idea? Why do I not actually value that? It really helps me have clarity. In not even like in a biased way, but just in a like, oh, well, this is an interesting way to think. It's a thought exercise. So Mercury is going to conjoin Venus in Pisces. This is definitely going to be like your guy best friend secretly confesses he's always actually loved you and you kind of knew it and he gave you attention, so that's why you were there. But Mercury conjoining Venus is slipping up, saying the big word. You're going through his text messages and you find out he bought a ring for you and now you ruined your own little fun, you idiot. Mercury conjoining Venus, you're both drunk, something slips out. That's kind of what's going on here. There's like a miscommunication or an error in fun and connection. That's okay. It really is. But that's what this is really going about. And you ever talk to people when they're like drunk or fucked up and they're just kind of saying stuff and you don't take it too seriously because you know they're intoxicated? That's how I'd want you to really treat a lot of this month is like, yeah. It's whatever. Yeah, we get it. Now, where it does get crazy is we will have on the 27th, the sun conjoin the North Node and Mars square Uranus. Okay. Sun conjoin the North Node, to be honest, it's not that big of a deal to me. I just think that's always more emphasizing eclipse season, which again, by the time we get to, what day is it? March 3rd is when we get the lunar eclipse in Virgo, where we throw everything in the trash. But on the 27th, Mars squaring Uranus, expect some disruptions. This seems like, how do I make a funny joke without pissing off all of you sensitive pussies? I'm trying to be better about that. Your Saturday charcuterie board picnic appointment you can't go to because there's an ice protest in the way. That's the way I look at Mars squaring Uranus, is there is some sort of major conflict that is disrupting things. Mars squaring Uranus might be breaking more than bending. You know, if you work out a lot, or if again, this is also trying to force stuff. Mars in Aquarius is very rigid, right? Like we're wanting to do it this way. Mars and Saturn also kind of magically have this mutual reception thing going on right now where they're both in each other's zodiac signs. So Mars in Aquarius is really being identified with like the tribe And I think as Mars is in Aquarius, we're like really pushing for stuff. And what I mean by pushing is Aquarius is very fixed, right? Like it's not about initiating or changing. It's about keeping something consistent. And Mars is it's trying to keep this thing consistent in Aquarius, which is like, again, you can even talk about technology or thoughts or, and again, with Aquarius, there's so much overlap with Mercury and Saturn and Aquarius. But as you're trying to keep that consistency and that rigidity, something breaks in the middle of it. It causes some sort of disruption. So whatever's going on in your life at the end of February, if you feel like, oh, okay, I'm feeling some resistance here, you're doing that stretch and it's kind of feeling good, but then you get to the moment where you go, something's about to break. You hit that pressure moment. Ease up, because there's going to be something that kind of snaps here. I think this is when the world starts to get a lot more crazy anyway this whole month. I've already talked about that ad nauseum. I'm kind of done talking about it anyway, because I've already, I was talking about 2026 and it's crazy shit like in 2023. So I'm like, it's in 2022, really. So I'm kind of over it at this point. But Mars squaring Uranus, this is going to be, what day is this on? Friday. Fun on a Friday. Just know that there's going to be some frustrating or anger or aggressive conflict that blows up out of nowhere. Maybe it's not out of nowhere, but it does really show its face very suddenly. Maybe that's you. Maybe it's someone else throwing it onto you. Just hold space for that. And it's one of those things where, it's like, I don't want to say it's like drunk driving. People who are drunk, when there's car accidents with a drunk driver, the drunk driver always ends up like living and they kill a whole family because the drunk driver is more loose and relaxed. That's the way to understand a Mars Uranus square. There's going to be this forced collision. And as that happens, you have to be loose and relaxed. Otherwise you die. You have to be the drunk driver in this case. That's a terrible analogy. But I think you get it. That's the February monthly horoscope, ladies and gentlemen. Website, link below. I just updated my whole website. StarTech, the app. I'm recording a video about that. It's going to be out on Wednesday when we launch. 2 p.m. on Wednesdays when we're launching. iOS only. Android's going to come out later this year. Everyone's been mad at me. Oh my God, when's the Android thing going to come out? Bruh, give me a minute, okay? One thing at a time, my precious little baby. So comment below. Let me know what transit you're looking forward to the most. Let me know what transit you're not looking forward to the most. Let me know if you're looking forward to StarTech. Let me know if you're just going to give up on life. Yeah, I don't know how to end this one since this is our first version of the monthly horoscope that we're going to be doing. Sorry that I'm not doing the weekly anymore. Just not want to do it. So this is my life, but I'm giving you guys something. I hope you enjoy this at the minimum. And with that being said, I'll be seeing you guys next month.